Hello, students. Welcome to the first topic of this course, Edu721 Psychology of Learning. This first lesson is on the topic of the concept of psychology, learning, and psychology of learning. There are three concepts you're going to learn there. And in this topic, we're going to be defining the meaning of psychology and discuss some of the scientific methods of investigation in psychology. We are also going to look at the concept of learning and discuss some of its attributes. In addition, we will discuss the concept of psychology of learning, its importance, of the nature of this psychology of learning and its importance to the classroom teacher. Sit back and enjoy the class. Like I said, we are considering in this topic, the concepts of psychology, learning, and psychology of learning. And what are the learning objectives for this lesson? Okay, yeah, after completing this lesson, you'll be able to define psychology. You'll be able to identify the scientific methods of psychology, of investigation in psychology, and discuss the advantages and disadvantages of each method. You'll be able to define the concept of psychology, the concept of learning, and discuss its attributes. You'll be able to explain any 5 changes in behavior that cannot be regarded as learning, because not everything is learning. Not every behavior is learning. And you'll be able to give reasons why the study of psychology of learning is of importance to the teacher. First of all, let us look at the meaning of psychology and what it involves in this concept. Psychology is derived from 2 Greek words, psycho, which means mind, and logos, which means science. Thus, psychology is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. And some researchers also have said that it is the study of the mind, how it works, and how it affects behavior. Why do you think psychologists study human behavior? They study human behavior in order to understand why people behave the way they do and make predictions about future behavior. Psychologists usually use scientific methods to understand why people behave the way they do and develop principles and theories about them. Okay, you now have a general overview of the meaning of psychology. Let's look at the branches of psychology. Yeah, it is a well-known fact that psychology embraces all aspects of human experience. There are different types of psychology that serve different purposes. And after going through this section of this topic, you will understand that there is hardly any sphere of human life where psychology is not being used. That is, psychology is applied in different areas of life, like social, clinical, education, physiology, genetics, sports, environment, and industrial settings. Let's consider some of these branches of psychology. Some of them include social psychology, clinical psychology, counseling psychology, developmental psychology, educational psychology, industrial psychology, or organizational psychology, sports psychology, experimental psychology, comparative psychology, abnormal psychology, physiological psychology, and environmental psychology. This list is not exhaustive. They are not exhaustive. So these are some of the important branches of psychology. Like I said, there is hardly any area of human life where psychology is not being applied, as you can see on this list. Well, I will just give you a brief description of a brief explanation of what each represents. Then you go to the lesson note. I've uploaded the lesson note on your course page. You go there and read up the details of this video, of this lesson video. For number one, social psychology. This branch of psychology is interested in the ways in which the behavior of an individual affects others. It is the study of social behavior and how they are influenced by the conditions in the society. Clinical psychology. This is the applied psychology that tries to use principles of knowledge in psychology to diagnose and treat emotional and behavioral problems. Counseling psychology. This is the field of psychology typically used in the schools to give the student advice on problems of social adjustment or vocational or educational goals. I'm sure some of you that teach in the schools have counseling psychologists present in those schools. They are being employed in some of the schools. I don't know if the school you're teaching in have this set of counseling psychologists. They're also called school psychologists, whichever one your school has. Okay, developmental psychology. This is a branch of psychology that studies the process of human growth and the factors that are responsible for human behavior from birth to the old age. Educational psychology. Okay, let me leave this out. That's why I've highlighted it in green color. Let me go on, I will come back to that. Industrial or organizational psychology. The psychologists in this field are concerned with the labor enhancement. They help industries or other establishments in personnel selection, training, leadership, and management. Sports psychology. This is a subfield of psychology that tries to apply skills and knowledge in psychology to promote the efficiency of sportsmen and women. Experimental psychology. Okay, it goes on and on and on and on. We have a lot to cover up in this lesson. So go read them up in the lesson note that I've uploaded. They're also in your course material, but the lesson note has been updated. I've updated the content of the lesson note, which you will find in your course page. Now, let me come to the one I've left out. Of all these branches of psychology, the one that relates directly to us as teachers, as most of you may be teachers or potential teachers, is that of educational psychology, the one I've highlighted in green color. Educational psychology plays an important role in the teaching learning process. It plays an important role. So this branch of psychology is concerned with the application of psychological principles to solve educational problems, to solve problems in the classroom. Psychologists working in the field of education are concerned with improving education by applying psychological principles in educational setting. And this branch of psychology is a study of how humans learn in educational settings. So these are the different meanings or the different definitions of educational psychology. And this branch of psychology plays an important role in the teaching learning process. Yeah, also, why do you think the knowledge of educational psychology is of importance to the teacher? Please refer to the note, to the lesson note on your course page to find out the reasons why this branch of psychology is of importance to the teacher. So read it up. Let's go over to another aspect of this lesson. Let's look at the scientific methods of investigation in psychology. Okay, like we said earlier on, that psychology is a scientific study of mind and behavior. And we have already mentioned that psychologists usually use scientific methods to understand why people behave the way they do. So in this session, in this aspect of this topic, we will discuss some of the scientific methods of investigation used by psychologists to understand the nature of human behavior. Each method has its own advantages and disadvantages. So some of these methods include survey method, test method, observational method, case history method, experimental method, and longitudinal method. The survey method, let me briefly explain what each method, how they are being used for investigation in psychology. The survey method, in this method, the researcher uses questionnaire or interview to obtain data from their respondents. And then one of the advantages of this method is that it allows the researcher to get a lot of information from many people within a short time. Like, you can design your questionnaire or your interview questions and administer these questions to a lot of your respondents at the same time and obtain data from them. One of the problems or one of the disadvantages of this method is that the respondents may be biased when giving their responses. And so the method can be highly subjective. You distribute your questionnaire to maybe 200 respondents, and they fill in the questions. And some of them might be biased in filling in the questions, their responses. So that's one of the disadvantages of this method. So let's take the next one, test method. Test method or psychological test, we call it psychological test. They are used to collect information about respondents' abilities, about respondent personalities, their interests, their attitudes, their intelligence and achievements. Such tests are referred to as test batteries. And we can use this test to seek information also from a large number of people, just like with the survey method, can be administered to a large number of people within a short time. But the advantage this method has is that it is standardized. The tests are mostly standardized, yes. Yes, so the same test, if it is a test of like personality test, if it is or intelligence test or achievement test, the same test you find in that is taken here in Nigeria can be taken anywhere, like in Ghana, like in England, like in other countries. So it is standardized. So everybody is taking that test. That's one good thing about the test method. So for this reason, because it is standardized, the test method is more objective, unlike the survey method, which is more subjective. The test method is objective, and therefore it provides accurate data than the survey method that we mentioned. Okay, so let's go on quickly to the next one, observational method. Observational. So as the name has been mentioned, as the name is, as you can see on the name, observational method. So it shows that observation is involved. Yes, in this method, the researcher observes the behavior under study in its natural setting without trying to manipulate or control the behavior. For instance, you want to study the behavior of some children in primary school. You want to find out maybe their play behavior during break time, their play behavior during break time, okay? And we are trying to observe them outside during their recreation, maybe during their break time. You want to observe some children to see how, maybe to see how they interact with one another, depending on the subject of interest or on what you are studying. So you are watching them and taking note of your observation. So that means you are observing them in their natural setting. You are not trying to manipulate or control the behavior. You are not the one ordering them, oh, do like this, do it this way, go and play with that person, you go play with that person. No, you just allow them. They're having a free time and they're on the playground playing, and you are observing their behavior. So that is observational method, the use of observational method. While observing, the researcher, you need to be highly skillful so that you observe and record accurately in order to obtain an objective data. As long as the data you have obtained are reliable, you did not manipulate the behavior, the data will be objective, just like the test method. That's one of the advantages. Another advantage of this method is that you see behavior as it occurs in its natural setting. You did not bring the children together, you're on your own, on your volition, maybe to manipulate their behavior. You allow them, you are looking at them in the play field to see how they are behaving. Okay, so what's the, are there disadvantages for this method? Yes. One of them is that the subject may decide, or those children may decide not to show their true behavior if they know that they are being studied. So if they discover that, they might not show their true behavior. That's one of the disadvantages. So let's go over to the next one, which is experimental method. Okay, case histories method. In this technique, the researcher collects data about an individual or group of individuals through the existing scientific biographies or case histories of that person. Okay, so the next one, experimental method. Yeah, this is a method in which the investigator makes use of two groups of subjects. You make use of two groups of subjects. One group is called the experimental group, and the other one is called the control group. Yeah, just as the name suggests, the experimental group is the one that you give special treatment. Okay, let me use the case of the children. Let's still use the case of the children in the playground. Okay, you divide the children into two groups. One group you call the experimental treatment, and then you give them something to play with. Here you are manipulating. You can see the difference between experimental method and observational method. Maybe you want to manipulate their play variable, manipulate the different types of play. Give one children one type of play. Maybe you give them a Ludo play to play, and then the other group, the control group, you won't give them anything. You don't manipulate. You don't give them any special treatment. The other one, you provide a means of play or anything children will like to play with, and provide it to them and see how the effects of Ludo game, for instance, I'm just using it as an instance. The effect of Ludo game on the play behavior of children. Let's assume that's the topic of your research. The effect of Ludo game on the play behavior of children. You take one group, manipulate them, give them special treatment, which is the Ludo game. Then the other group, you don't give them anything. You don't expose them to any experimental treatment. So the role of the control group there, after they have finished, and then maybe you give them a questionnaire, they fill, then you now compare the results of the two to see if actually that Ludo game had an effect on the play behavior of the children. The control group there, what it does is to provide a baseline against which to compare the experimental group. Because if in the absence of any control group, you can't really say whether the data you obtained, the observation you made from the research or the questionnaire, the data, the responses from the questionnaire, whether they represent the actual behavior of those students. So it's the behavior of the control group that will now determine, that will be used to compare and show you whether there is any difference between the two. Maybe the experimental group has scored like 10 out of 15. And then the control group has scored, depending on the technique you're using in analyzing their behavior, or they have scored like 3 out of 15. So would you now, how would you analyze, how would you conclude? What conclusion would you draw on this data you have obtained? The experimental, yes, from there you will know that, oh, the control group, and make sure you are choosing the two groups of children must be alike in every way. They must be alike, the same age group, the same class, from the same background, from the same home background, and if possible, from the same type of school. If it's a public school, make sure it's from the same. Don't go and choose one group from private school, choose another group from public school. No, make sure that all the variables, all the things you use in classifying them, all the variables for classification must be equal. You will match them on equal variables, except that thing you want to find out, that which of course is the play group. The play group will be determined from the result of your experiment. So the final one, the longitudinal method. Let's take the longitudinal method. Here in this method, the investigator conducts an extensive study of the subject and follows the same group of subjects at different points in time as they grow older, with measurements made at periodic intervals. For instance, a longitudinal method will be used to study the same group of children when they were like 5 years. You are studying a particular group of children when they were like 5 years, and then you measure them again at 7 years, and again at 10 years, the same group of children or the same group of subjects, and again at 15 years. So for this reason, that's why it's called longitudinal, longitudinal. You measure the same group of children or the same group of subjects, over a long period of time with measurements done at periodic intervals. So for this reason, this method usually takes a long time to finish. That's one of the disadvantages. And then I think I have some of this. The summaries are also here. The disadvantages. Sorry, I didn't bring them up on time. So longitudinal, yeah. So one of the disadvantages is that it takes a long time to finish. And then another disadvantage of this method is that any of the subjects who disappears or dies before the conclusion of the investigation, the investigator may not have a conclusive report about the investigation. So I want you to pause at this juncture and attempt this class activity. Differentiate between experimental and longitudinal methods. Mention 3 data we can use to collect test method, through test method. Mention 3 data we can collect through test method. Okay, let's continue. Now we are coming to yet another aspect of this lesson, which is the concept of learning and its attributes. We are going to clarify the concept of learning. I will first of all give an overview of what learning means. Learning is a psychological concept that cuts across psychology and education. It is the most important factor in understanding human behavior. Remember, human behavior. We want to understand, that is why we teachers, or that is the essence of psychology, or the essence of educational psychology, the understanding of human behavior. There are very many activities that we do that involve learning. For instance, you are learning as you learn, as you listen to this lecture. You are learning as you read your course materials. You are learning as you watch instructional videos. You are learning. Learning is also involved in many other aspects of life. Many other aspects of life. You learn to ride a bicycle. You learn to drive a car. You learn to play football. These are all aspects of learning. Most of what we do or do not do is influenced by what we learn and how we have learned it. So what is learning? This is just a general overview. What is learning? Learning has been defined in many ways. To a layman, learning refers to knowing something. You learn what you have taught. To some, it is a process of acquiring knowledge. However, to psychologists, learning is much more than that. Psychologists do not agree with the simplistic layman's definition of learning, of the layman's view of learning. So we need to have a clear understanding of what psychologists refer to as learning. From a psychological point of view, learning is defined as a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience or practice. Please note the key words, the 4 key words in that definition. The key words include permanent, change, behavior, experience, or practice. This definition emphasizes 4 attributes of learning. What are they? This definition shows that learning involves change in behavior, be it good or bad behavior. And the change in behavior must be relatively permanent. Number 3, only change in behavior acquired through experience or practice is considered learning. How can one learn through experience? An example, I will explain that later on. Let's just look at the general attributes of learning. And then finally, learning is universal and continuous. It is not confined to our schooling only. It is a lifelong process, and it is not limited to any age, gender, race, or culture. How can one learn through experience? For instance, if a child approaches a burning matchstick and gets burnt and withdraws, the next time that child faces a burning matchstick, that child will waste no time in withdrawing themselves away because of the experience of that that child got the first time. The child learns to avoid not only the burning matchstick, but all burning things. When this happens, we say that the child has learned. So this is just a typical example of how one can learn through experience. And I'm sure you can, maybe we'll discuss that in class when we meet, on how you can share your experience, how you have learned one thing or the other through experience. But let's go on in this class. So we have considered the attributes of learning, what is, what learning involves. So what is it that, what is not considered learning? Is it all behaviors that are considered learning? No, there are behaviors that are not considered learning. For instance, a change in behavior caused by the following factors, like a change in behavior due to fatigue, a change in behavior due to illness, a change in behavior due to alcohol, a change in behavior due to drugs, are not considered learning. Why? Can you tell me why? Oh yes, because they are temporary change in behavior. They are not permanent. Remember what we said about the definition of learning. It's a permanent change, a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience or practice. Please, anytime you are asked to define what learning means anywhere, please do not use the layman's definition of learning. Make sure you define learning from the psychological point of view, please. Okay, so we said it does not include change in behavior caused by these following factors. For instance, the change in the behavior of a drunkard or a drug addict cannot be regarded as learning, since that behavior is not permanent, a drug addict. And then there is another factor that should also be included here, that is maturation. That is for number 2. Learning does not include the changes in behavior due to growth or maturation. Growth or maturation. However, maturation must take place before learning can take effect. For instance, when you look at the stages of a child's development, when a child is born and the child is growing, first of all, the child will learn how to eat. At least the child is born with that instinct, with the eating, they will start sucking the mother's through the sucking instinct. Then later the child will now learn how to eat. The mother will, or the parents will introduce gradually to the child to eat when the child is mature enough to eat. And then when the child is matured enough to sit, the child will sit. The child will crawl when it's time for the child to crawl. The child will be able to stand, to walk, and to speak. The child is now capable of doing some things which they could not do earlier in life due to maturation. So that takes us to this number 3 point. Would you consider those changes that occur in the stages of a life's development, of a child's development, being able to eat, sit, crawl, stand, walk, run, and speak? Would you consider them as learning? Would you consider them as learning? Why? Yeah, they are not learning because all these changes that occurred in the stages of a child's development are due to the child's growth, to the child's maturity. Remember the point 2, the second point here, learning does not include changes in behavior due to growth or maturation. So they are not caused, they did not occur, those changes did not occur as a result of experience or practice. So that takes us to the final aspect of this topic, the need for the study of psychology of learning. I will just read through the main ideas, and then please read up the details of each of these ideas in your on the lesson notes that has been posted to your course page. To understand the theories of learning, to understand individual differences, to master the concept of motivation, to understand the process of remembering and forgetting, to help the learner to transfer skills. Each of them have their details specified in the lesson notes that has been posted to your course page. So read them up. So I want you to attempt this class activity too. From a psychological point of view, what do you understand by the concept of learning? List any 3 changes in behavior that cannot be regarded as learning. So in summary, in this lesson, we learned the concept of psychology. We also discussed the branches of psychology, with educational psychology being the one that concerns us as teachers. We also discussed the scientific methods of investigation in psychology. And from there, we went on to discuss the concept of learning and its attributes, and also looked at the reasons why the study of psychology is of importance to the teacher. I hope you enjoy the class. Until then, we will see we meet again to discuss topic 2. For now, is bye-bye.